So, hi, I am joined today by Paul O'Sullivan, who is Senior Vice President of Solution Engineering and CTO of UK and Ireland at Salesforce. Delighted to have you with us today, Paul. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, John. Great to be here and great to be with you today.
Excellent. And of course, the most important role you fulfill is as a member of our advisory board at aibl, which we're delighted that you're part of. So thank you as well for being on that. So if I may start, you've written previously that something might be missing from the AI revolution, and that something is imagination. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I no doubt that some of my previous comments will probably come back to haunt me, but let's try and unpack this a little bit because when I think about imagination, I try and think about it in the context of your existing business and how your business operates. AI and everything that we do from, going way back from predictive to now to agentic AI, there is a real opportunity in front of us, in front of every business leader out there. The challenge, however, is, do we operate our businesses the same way we've always operated them? Can we reimagine? Can we rethink? Can we apply a level of creativity to kind of understand and look at where we can apply AI to, reach completely new customer segments, to be able to drive a significant level of hyper-personalization that builds that incredible loyalty, And I think the constraint within an organization or an operation is just the habit of going, this is the way we've always done it. Therefore, this is how we're going to do it. And when that happens, we're just going to apply AI to point solutions. And we're going to miss this opportunity to reimagine what our businesses could look like in the future. So that's really what the essence behind what I was trying to get to at that point.
I mean, I really like that. The way I rather simply like to think about the advent of AI is that it allows humans more time by getting rid of some of the donkey work, the boring stuff, to be more creative, more imaginative, more social, more partnership-led, whatever it be, the things that machines can't currently do. And what I've seen through conversations with leaders is, you talk about hyper-personalization. I was talking to someone recently who's using the fact that AI can talk in any language to then provide a level of support to their customers that they weren't previously able to do. And that's just seeing their metrics go up in terms of how customers perceive them. It's things like that I think are really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I think language support is absolutely crucial. And we've got some customers that are, real trailblazers in this space. They're using more than 13 languages for, engagement with their customers. But I think what you've also got now is this opportunity to systematically look at your customers. Why are they interacting with you? What are they engaging with you on? How do you respond based on style, but also still represent your brand, your purpose, the tone of voice of your organization? And you've got there's a huge opportunity to be able to do that at massive scale. So it's really exciting to see what we can unlock together on this space.
Absolutely. You've also previously said that FOMO, fear of missing out for those uneducated amongst us, is driving more AI investment than actual business purpose. And that's also something we see a lot. People are like, oh, I must buy something AI because the board or the CEO has told me to. Expand on what you mean by that, and how much of that do you see in specifically the mid-market?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think FOMO will get you to a pilot, but having real intention around your transformation and where you're going to apply, agentic AI to be an agentic organization in the future is really to have that intentional kind of view, and that strategic view is going to drive real business results. So for me, what did I see very early on was we all saw the hype cycle. We saw the great opportunity of AI, and everyone it was a jaw-dropping moment where people were like, this is going to be incredible. The technology is great. Imagine what we could do with it. And then we limited ourselves with our imagination. We then kind of panicked because I think lots of organizations and lots of senior execs immediately went, well, they're doing it. I've got to do it. Therefore, hence the FOMO came out. And I think I would now kind of position this as people started to dip their toe in, but because there wasn't a meaningful intention around what does my business need? Where are the problems I've got within my organization? How can I actually deliver greater results either with the same amount of effort or, lower effort? And to really be able to push the boundary of it, that's where I think customers are now winning. So when you've got this real kind of when you've kind of applied strategic thinking to what you're trying to actually unlock within your business, it will see you beyond the pilot phase. And I was quite worried at one phase over the last kind of 18 months, because I think the FOMO action meant that a lot of organizations did it for the sake of doing something, and to kind of report to their investors or their board members to say, yeah, we're doing AI. We know how to do this. Um, it lacked the link between doing something that was very, chatbot copilot like, that couldn't take action and couldn't drive business results. That link was missing. And we're now bridging that gap. And we're really showing the opportunity that how can we actually take an organization and actually start with agentic AI, having these interactions with AI technology and agents that can then go and fulfill tasks on your behalf. And that bridging that gap and that chasm is really the opportunity in front of us. Some customers are really pushing the boundary on this and being really creative now, but I still think we've got a lot of work to do to get everybody to that position.
And that's really interesting, and because I'm sure your algorithm, news sources, LinkedIn, etc., is dominated with AI as mine is, because that's the world we live in. But when I talk to people who don't live in our world, they're like, well, no, I mean, we might use ChatGPT occasionally, but we're certainly nowhere near agentic. What do you think the rate of change is? How fast is that moving from what you're seeing?
I think we've got to remind ourselves, John, like we're 18 months in. We're probably not even 18 months in. If I go back to, when was it? Not October last year, the year before. So we're talking 2024, November, October timeframe. We launched Agent Force, and we were the first agentic solution. So that connectivity of kind of how do you combine generative AI workflow to create agentic AI. So when we put it in the context of time, I think the adoption rate is higher than I probably would have seen anywhere else. When we think about, we've also got to go back and statistically look at, when ChatGPT launched in November, was it 2022? Within 6 months, it was the fastest adopted technology we've ever seen. So the adoption curve is there, but I still think, and I worry on the adoption curve being very much proof of concept, pilot orientated. The percentage of organizations are, when we think about businesses that are out there, we're still not seeing that kind of, now let's make it really tangible and drive some business results, right? Whether that's, I want to improve productivity or efficiency. That's typically the first thing that people go after, right? How can this be used in a role that can augment what my teams do? But we're also now starting to see this opportunity where it's kind of going, well, actually, how do I use it for growth? So if we think about marketing campaigns, outreach, lead nurturing, there's a huge opportunity to apply AI and agentic AI in those kind of verticals within your business that can start to unlock different components of your value chain. I think the adoption is still fast for where we are. In a bigger context of technology over the last probably 30, 40 years. But we've got to get, again, really intentional around where we're going to unlock some business value, because that's where it becomes really sticky. That's where it's ingrained and incorporated within my organization, and it's something that I'm going to continuously use because it's adding a tremendous amount of value to my business.
So, you're talking there about a potential blocker for leaders, using AI, and that's not necessarily understanding that business value. Is that something that we all have to help with? And are there any other blockers that you think these firms are facing when it comes to adopting AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot to kind of unpack in that. So I think the first thing I would say is the foundations need to be right. So when we think about the foundations, let's think about, an age-old problem that we have probably all heard a million times over, which is data, right? The first thing is, within my organization, my data is everywhere, because I'm probably a mid-market customer that's rapidly growing. We've built, and we've got a technology ecosystem within our organization where we've kind of got one component over here, we've got a different component over here, we've got another component, and a lot of that has been managed to serve the business needs. But actually, all of those systems don't talk to each other. They're not connected. And actually, they've got lots of data silos within those. So that prohibits you from having not just a single view of your customer and what your customer is going through and how you might serve that customer, but it also prevents you from giving the context to an AI around what your business is trying to achieve. So I think getting your data foundations in good shape and good order is really, really crucial to anyone's success. The next piece is skills of the future. If we think about kind of your organization and how you run your business today and the people, we are still people centric in everything we do. And we've got to look at this around, humans are the people that are going to actually interact with the technology and unlock the value from this technology. But do they understand it? Do they understand what data I can give it, what I shouldn't give it, what am I using a large language model that is publicly available and therefore it's public data? I'm sharing my information out there in the wild. Do I have a ring-fenced LLM that's locally for me and my organization? And again, so you think about the security, the guardrails, the controls, the compliance. Like, we need to educate people on this. And then we can, take that even one step further, because I think we've got to overcome this inertia. I think there is a bit of a nervousness in the workforce around, will AI take my job? Personally, I believe no. I think what it will do is it will elevate you as an individual. It'll give you like a superpower to be able to do things differently, to hopefully get more cognitive capacity to be able to do the strategic thinking that your organization really wants you to do, but you're prohibited because you're bogged down in the day-to-day operations and how you run your business. So I think all organizations have a duty of care and responsibility to your employees to be able to educate and support them in their learning journey around how do you adopt AI safely and securely in your enterprise. Then I would say that's kind of data foundations, that's kind of the employee and training required. And then the third big kind of piece for me has to be around this whole, the world has been ignited and excited by a large language model, by one of these foundational models. This might be ChatGPT, it might be Gemini, it might be Claude from Anthropics, it could be it could be any large language model out there. But I truly believe that these are commodities, that they're amazing pieces of technology, but in isolation and on their own, not connected to a bigger system. They will just give you a request and response, an input and an output. You need to be able to bring the data foundation so that you can give context to what you're trying to achieve. So things like retrieval augmentation generation, so you can ground your data in the prompts. You need to be able to safely check for things like hallucinations, toxicity, bias, all of those things that you need to check for. And then you still need to be able to activate it wherever the work is happening. So if you think about, I might use a system to engage with to write my marketing campaigns, to do outreach. You might need to bring the AI to that system where you do your work. And when we look at some of our statistics, like I think it's about, like, across our own organization, it's about 89% of where AI is operational is where the work is actually getting done. So it's in the applications that the employees are using. Now, that will be different for different organizations, but standalone kind of chat interfaces on their own is probably not enough. So those are the three kind of things for me. If we think about the foundations, the data foundations, the learning and development for the people using the technology, and then the third one is the LLM on its own is not enough. It needs to be connected to a much larger system. So, don't plan to DIY your AI is what I would say, because you're going to lose time to value. You're probably not going to be able to move at the same pace as one of your strategic technology partners could, to help you unlock the value really quickly. So those are some of the big things that I'm thinking about and I'm seeing at the moment talking to customers.
I would call those three pretty big blockers. And I can understand why it might make people nervous and drive that inertia you talked about. The middle one, which is the people function. I love the phrase cognitive capacity, by the way. I'm definitely going to steal that. So that feels to me to be the one that potentially would be the easiest to solve of the three, because it's the least technical. I'm not kind of dumbing down the people challenges that we all have in our businesses. But, it will need supervision, continuous training, evolution, all of this kind of things. And the real prize then is freeing up more of that cognitive capacity. I'm already stealing it. New business models. So, but what I hear from people, because this has been a hot topic in my conversations, is that people are already really time poor. There's no bandwidth. They're already stretched. How do you think organizations can help to drive that change, to free up that space so that people can learn the skills they need and slightly change their ways of thinking to get on this adoption journey?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point. And I would say today we're people are time poor. I would also say we're in a really difficult situation. Everybody is, right? Let's be honest about it. We're not only time poor, but the pace of change is so dramatic. It's really hard to keep up with. So you've got this double whammy across both. This will boil down to just really good leadership, great prioritization, and I think also when we think about kind of the strategic direction that you want to go in. What I'm also saying to customers at the moment is pick one or two use cases that will give you, incremental margin gain, right? And that margin might be, I need that little bit more capacity. And actually then when you've got a little bit, you can actually reinvest that little bit into how do you unlock the next thing? And then you unlock the next thing. And suddenly this is like an overwhelming factor, very similar to the data challenge, because lots of customers say to me, they say, Paul, we've been trying to solve the data problem for the last 10 years. We've had 3 big transformations around data and we still haven't cracked it. How are we going to do this? And when I talk to customers about that, then this is very similar to kind of the time poor piece. The principle is still the same. Is I say to them, well, your volume of data is all of this, right? It's huge. But what do you really need that's going to drive value in that one particular use case? And what you'll find is it's probably a small subset of data, right? It might be a couple of objects, it might be one schema as opposed to much larger stuff. And if you can focus on those things that are going to add value to your organization now, and then actually then kind of over time take the next piece and then the next piece. Very similar to kind of when I think about the human element around being time poor is what I would say to people at the moment is within your landscape and your organization, I would say just start with the basics, right? Safety and security is where I would say start, right? Just understand and have bite-sized learning that says, I'm not going to give a publicly available LLM, corporate information or information about my organization, right? That's kind of 101, right? Start from there. Then I would probably try and build that onto how do you write a really good prompt, right? So, and I'm not saying we all talked about prompt engineering as a future skill, and I think it will be, but I think prompt engineering will equally, like an LLM, become a commodity. We're all just going to have to get really good at it. But when I talk to customers very early on, and this is going back kind of 18 months ago, I used to ask customers, how many times do you give a set of instructions to an LLM before you get the response you were looking for? And on average, it was between 4 and 5. I would say we've got better. And what I'm now seeing is people kind of saying between 2 and 3. So, they're starting to figure out how do they converse. And plus also the other component to this in this larger system is we need to be able to give these language models memory. And that's the piece in the context stuff. And if we can give it memory, they can kind of understand over time what we're trying to achieve, and therefore the responses get better. But coming back to the learning piece, I think we've got to take little chunks over a period of time. And I would encourage people to have a plan for 12 months, but kind of go, what could you do every single month in a bite-sized capacity that could level up all of your organization to be AI native?
You talked about prompt engineering there, and I believe you've previously called it conversation design, which is another Paul O'Sullivan term that I'm going to be stealing. How can, and I believe this is really important as well, and I've seen through my own evolution of using LLMs how my effectiveness when redesigning my prompts has led to much, much more improved outputs. How can leaders train themselves on this as a skill? Is it simply what I've done, practice makes perfect, or are there any resources that you'd recommend they look at? How have you done it? What would you suggest?
Yeah, it's a good question. So conversational design for me is also probably something that a future skill and something that I know lots of people have been doing CX for a very long time. And customer experience more generally is really crucial to adoption rates, success, how people are going to interact with your technology. I think in the world of AI, conversational design is equally crucial because the AI needs to have some level of, well, first of all, it needs to represent your organization. So when we think about brand, tone of voice, how does it represent you? The same way that somebody in your service center, in your contact center, who might, pick up the phone and talk to a customer, will need to be able to represent your organization. The second step is kind of understanding then. So if we put ourselves into that contact center person, the next thing will be, how do I understand what they're calling about? So when we think about, it could be a complaint, it could be an unhappy customer, there could be a service outage or an issue. So how do you recognize the sentiment in the tone that the customer is talking to you about? Now, I wouldn't imagine for a minute that AI has yet to get to that fully empathetic kind of emotional understanding, but we can understand by word pattern matching to be able to identify if somebody seems distressed, if somebody seems, you know, angry, upset, mad, frustrated. So based on that, could we have the AI be able to understand based on word matching and patterns to be able to, respond in an empathetic kind of suggested synthetic type manner? What we've actually done in our AI center at Salesforce is we've actually resurrected the Alan Turing test by an example. So we have two conversational insights, two conversational panels. One has a human behind it, and one has an AI agent behind it. And the reason we've done this is we ask our customers to come along and try it. They have 5 minutes that they have the same conversation running in parallel with both sides of the equation. And then after a 5-minute window, they have to guess which one's the agent and which one's the human. And the reason for this is, if we think about the experience for the end user, if you can't distinguish between the human or the AI agent, you're more likely to just feel kind of like, this is fine, I can have a conversation with this person, I'm going to interact. And therefore, if you have a good experience, you're going to come back. So I think that for me is why conversational design for AI is absolutely crucial for successful kind of deployment of AI in the future.
I love the fact that you guys are using something that was created, 70, 80 years ago
Yeah.
to assess tech in this day and age. What have the results been of that? I'm curious. How's that played out?
It's really mixed. I had about 20 customers, and it was really interesting because we did it, and other people watched as one person interacted, and you could really see that between the 20 people, I would say the room was divided. No, that's it. No, this is it. So the responses were quite interesting. It's such a good test because it has stood the test of time, literally. Obviously, the way in which we talk, our grammar is very different to way back then. But I would encourage people to, again, when you deploy your AI components or agents, I would encourage people to go and get not just your employees to test it and get user feedback and usability feedback, but get your customers, do small pilots, but get it out there, because I think the results would really surprise you. I would encourage people to just move beyond the pilot and proof of concept and get some real user feedback and user testing as well.
So that's a wonderful segue into my next question. So you've talked a lot about pilots in our conversation so far, and you recently cited, I think it was an MIT study, where 95% of generative AI pilots collapse after the demo stage. What do you think business leaders in mid-market or any other type of organization need to do to move beyond that demo? What do they need to get right in the first 90 days? Or do you think it's something different?
The first 90 days are absolutely crucial. I think the use case that you pick, it has to be realistic, achievable, and it has to be linked to your business, your organization, and how you run your business. I think there has been a lot, and this comes back to the kind of FOMO piece, but there's been a lot of proliferation. There's been a lot of tinkering, trying things, and lots of disconnected things. If you think about kind of the whole concept of agent sprawling and things being popped up across organizations and all different things, because, our people naturally just try things. But you've got to be able to, in that first 90 days, you really have to be intentional. You have to say, this is one use case and I'm going to take it all the way. I've got the database sorted because I only need 3 or 4 objects to be able to kind of augment my prompts and really get some meaningful responses. I only need one workflow to be triggered or one API call to be made. And actually being able to narrow the scope into one use case, then measure the value from that, and then actually move on to the next and then the next, I think is a really fundamental kind of component. There is risk that organizations try and create these monolithic transformations, and then suddenly they've got these proliferation of different tools in different areas. And then, because naturally we do have an element of human creativity, we've also got people that will say, well, I can actually build that myself. And then you've got bolt-on tools and all this other stuff. I think you've really got to cut through the noise. You've got to look for the signal on what is the thing that's going to unlock business value, cut through the noise. And what I would really encourage people to do is look for your technology partners that can help you move at a pace. We've purposely and intentionally kind of built our solutions. If I go back 2 years ago, we very much focused on the trust layer because we knew immediately that customers need to be able to do all the required checks, connect to any LLM, but through a secure gateway. We've got to be able to look for hallucination and toxicity. We need to be able to temperature set an LLM so that we can actually give it freedom of creativity, or we need deterministic output. Those things on their own look really kind of easy, but when you try and connect that to kind of then being able to do retrieval augmentation generation, bring unstructured data alongside structured data, and then actually activate it in a system of work, it's really hard. And I think organizations and companies, they need to start small on the single use cases, but they need to have a real look at their overall strategic direction, because otherwise the problem with this whole kind of agent sprawling is we're going to add technical debt really quickly, and customers are going to see a lot of sunken cost. And actually, when you think about some of the technology partners, can you keep up with the R&D effort of someone that you're partnering with? I think that's a real kind of key thing to think about as well, because I think it comes back, John, to the point around the pace of change is significant. The LLMs are changing. You need the freedom to swap in and out an LLM as it improves. You also need to be able to say, for this use case, do I need this large language model with these billion parameters, or with a smaller large language model with a more sustainable kind of impact from an energy consumption, still meet the same business objectives that I'm trying to achieve? So these are all the things that, and I know it's hard, but another bit of advice would be, look at your partners out there and invest in the conversation to understand the strategic direction of your partners, because they actually might help you go quick.
I think it's incredibly sage advice, and it's part of what we're trying to do at aibl as well, is to help people on that journey. And I think what you've done there is you've identified two more blockers to people. One is trust, which is huge and keeps coming up over and over again. And certainly I hear it a lot. So I'm just not sure what I can trust, who I can trust. And the other one is the huge amounts of choice there is out there in terms of technology partners, and how do people pick the right partner, knowing that in not just 6 months, but in 2 months, whether that's still the right partner for them because of the rate of change. So yeah, it's a tricky landscape to navigate at the moment.
It is tricky, but what I will say at this junction is our customers are seeing some fantastic results across every segment. In the mid-market and commercial segment, especially, we've had customers who have now seen, anything up to and some that exceed kind of 70% resolution rates on where they've applied agentic AI in their service use cases. So if you think about kind of post-sale support, how do you actually service those customers if they want to do returns, if they've got issues with products and things like that? When we think about 70% resolution rate, we're not even talking about channel deflection. We're talking about genuine resolution. Those are incredible results. So the results do speak volumes. So we've also had in the enterprise space, we've had customers now kind of fully go in on this, and again they've seen very similar results. I think our own Salesforce story talks about I think it's 83% resolution rate. We've also seen that's returned over 100 million in annualized savings for us. So there's huge opportunity to be had. And we've got now, I think, well over 20,000 customers globally that are on their Agentforce journey. So the results will speak volumes. There will be choppy water. There's a lot to navigate. There's a lot of blockers that we need to overcome. But the same was there when we all tried to shift into digital many years ago and we did our digital transformations. Yes, AI has a different level of complexity when we think about explainability, auditability, trust, all of those things we've talked about today. But I think collectively, when we overcome those, the results will be significant.
I couldn't agree with you more. I do see it as a land of opportunity, and I think the people who get this right or are prepared to take risks and to try things are those who are going to be the most successful. And working with organisations like yourselves would certainly help them with that. We've talked about a lot of things right now, but if you were acting as an advisor to a mid-market CEO, what's the one thing you would kind of give them as a piece of advice for them to think about right now when it comes to AI adoption of all of the things we talked about?
So, an advisor to a board member or somebody or a C-suite in the mid market is what I would say to them right now is for them to get their hands on the technology. There is nothing quite like a leader who turns around and says, "Look at what I did," whether it's over the weekend, whether it was on a Wednesday afternoon. Look at how I'm using the technology. Set the tone and example for your organization, because others will follow, and they're looking to the leaders of these organizations to say, this is it, this is how it's working, this is how I can get benefit from this technology, even if it's something as simple as summarization of your last meeting, to draft an email to send to a customer in a follow-up. Use it, show it to your employees, and what you'll find is that will drive the momentum that you need in your organization for the full adoption. The time is now, is what I would say.
It's that old adage, isn't it? Leading by example. Couldn't agree with you more, Paul. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I could keep going for hours, but thank you very much for your time. We've enjoyed having you on, and best of luck with everything you're doing with Agentforce. It sounds fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
You.